Canine Detection Collaborative, a detection dog training trio with Stacy Barnett.
Hi.
Robin Grubel.
Hey there.
And Crystal Wing.
What's up?
With humor and a big dose of theory, our trio talks practical training advice and features interviews with top trainers and scientists.
It's Canine Detection Collaborative.
Welcome back to Canine Detection Collaborative. I am one of your hosts, Crystal Wing, and I'm here in Iowa still at Robin Grubel's place. And Robin Grubel, of course, is here as well. Hello.
Hello.
And poor Stacy doesn't get to come visit and play with us until August at Distraction Camp, but we're all going to be together. I can't wait.
Yay.
Hello, Stacy.
Yay. I can't wait. I can't wait. But I do feel a little bit left out seeing all the pictures and all the fun you guys are having. And I'm sitting here going, oh.
Today was Farrier Day. I got to learn all about mini donkey feet and how to hold them. And Donnie, the little baby, I had to actually pick him up because he was getting a little ornery. And I'm like, Donnie, I was telling the farrier how proud I was. Every day I've been doing husbandry stuff. I've been petting him and holding his feet. And, you know, he's going to be so great. Oh, that is not what happened. I'm like, no, he's feral. Sorry.
Yeah, Donnie was like, I'm stranger danger.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes. So
well, we tried real hard.
We did.
So I kind of got off topic, but donkeys and distractions, and that's happening. So everybody should join us still. There's some spots open, distraction camp here at Canine Census in Iowa.
First part of August.
Oh, yeah.
Good for nose work and detection dog trainers. We're going to be doing some fun stuff.
And I actually set up a problem that I tried to trick Robin into doing yesterday, and she doesn't know it. So we had a buried problem out in the field, and it was really a challenging buried problem because the grass is waist high in places, and in other places I'm 5'8", and it was as tall as me in other places. And we ran it early in the morning, but still the heat, you know, it's all down low and there's not a lot of breathing space. And Nico was out there just burning it off at first, just like Yukon did. And it ended up being a really nice, challenging problem. And then yesterday I said, hey, would you like to run another one? This one's a little bit easier. And, you know, it's out in this field over here and I have flags up and everything. And she said, no. And I said, well, should I go pick up the source? And she's like, no, let's let somebody else run it. There's no source to pick up. It's a big blank area. So I was trying. Yeah. And it's right at the edge of a pond. And then after having all of that hard work, you know, and there is an excellent diversion though. There's a raccoon nest inside of this tree. And so I could definitely see, because I thought what a great place to do it, because as searching through this area, they're not going to find anything, you know, productive. And then if they think they should have something in this space, well, they would probably go and indicate on this raccoon nest.
Something novel.
So I was thinking, ooh, that could be a really great blank area. Well, I guess, you know what exactly do you guys define as a blank area? I guess we should start with that.
So I think about blank areas in kind of two different ways, since Crystal mentioned something and we talk before we start recording episodes, right? So there's nobody's ever been in it. We've just dropped out some flags, or I've identified a place that's a blank area, and it is sterile from diversions. And I'm assuming that there are no that there are natural distractions out there. Nothing has been placed. So when I think of blank areas, that's predominantly what I think of. So I guess that's my definition of a blank area.
Yeah, and we see this a lot in the higher levels of nose work. So once you get to the NW3 and you start to, NW3 and higher, you can get blank areas. So that could mean that one of our search areas, in NW3, you have a possibility 1 out of 6 of your search areas could be devoid of hides. And we would consider that blank. And that could occur in any of the 4 elements. So it could occur in either an interior, exterior, container, or vehicle search. Then at the elite, we're at the summit level, you can get a blank area, which, by the way, is really, really stressful at summit. When that happens, I remember I had one of those. And so if you have a search there that's blank, that's actually worth a little extra points. So we can definitely get those.
I was thinking about for blanks too, something that, I've taught UConn footprint tracking because of IGP.
Yeah.
And when he hits in an area, if there's nothing there, then he acts totally different than when he starts hitting footprints. And so I had to start making sure that I had either a person or several people go walk around in the blank area. And I'm thinking wilderness type area, just to kind of, preface with where we are. Even inside, I've noticed in buildings, I will have people walk around and touch the doorknobs and touch the walls and sit on things. Even to Robin, I was curious. I did a little experiment because we had talked about how dogs can read on dopamine and different hormones and such. And so at one of the last ones we did with one of the local sheriffs, I went in and I sat at a table and I read something really, really sad. Because I wanted to see, if it did something different, because yes, I'm sitting there for a while. And I thought they probably thought I was crazy. It took me so long to just set a couple things out. And then I went into the back bedroom and I put some music on and I danced around and I was like, this is the best song ever. And so those areas were actually blank areas, but I was really I wanted to see what the dog's behavior was, if it was any different due to even the emotional states of the humans that were there, even though they weren't even looking for human stuff. But still, they're so in tune to us and what we do. So I think it's important to consider those blank areas not just sterile environments, but try to make them as true to our search environments as we can. So I wanted lots of footprint places for UConn and lots of places touched, and then places with lots of emotion. Because, with search and rescue, there's a lot of emotions in a lot of the places that we go. And so I thought maybe I could tap into some of that. So it was an experiment and the dogs did beautifully. But I will say there's been other places with the team that I'm training with currently, and they had some reactions. Some of the dogs had some reactions to the places where we came in and danced around, and the dog showed a lot more interest and a lot more tail movement and head up. So it's fascinating to watch the dogs.
Well, and I think that that's a very valid point, because often when, you do a blank area, in search and rescue, you set one, and everybody can imagine me doing the air quotes in the air, right? And when you're out setting your hides, you in and of yourself spend a little bit more time in the area where you have set whatever you're setting out. And so if we all imagine we're like little pig pens running around setting out hides, then there's a bigger cloud of human odor or human scent where you were just placing that hide. Whether, and I don't know how many times I've done this. I've been like, oh, I'm going to hide something here. And then for some unknown reason, the container won't fit, or, all of these other things. And it just becomes frustrating. And you end up, then you go, ooh, this is going to be a good hide, to almost frustrating and annoyed all in this 30 seconds, because you're now standing in this spot for 30 seconds. You're like, I've totally contaminated the area. And you still place the hide, and then you walk away, but you never stand for 30 seconds in some other random area and roll around on the ground or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was searching with the girls this morning, and they did that. I ran prize first. Brava came out, nose went to the ground. I'm like, oh, you're tracking your sister. Or, oh, you're tracking me. And she used that information to get into the area that was productive. And I'm sitting there going, I got to do something about this. It was the first time I physically saw her track the other dog or track me. Totally. Yeah. They use all that information. So you're totally right. Just standing in the search area, the dogs react to it. They use it.
When I very first got started, I kept calling them cheater smurfs. I'm like, you're just a cheater smurf. You can't do that. And then I thought, you know what? I love that you do that, because, Robin taught me the idea. Yeah. She taught me the idea of search, locate, and report. And so I start my foundation like the Scandinavians, and like what she showed about, I teach the report first and we work really hard on the locate. And Stacy, you've helped me so much with that, of driving into source and, making them more, true to where the odor is. But it's the search piece now that's the part of the whole blank area. And that's what I love so much about blanks. It's the place that I've best learned how to read my dog. And I start at day one because I've been, seeing search and rescue long enough now that, most of the searches we go on, you don't find anything.
Right.
They're blank. So when most of the stuff we do is blank, but then in training, they're finding stuff, bam, 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 over and over. It just didn't make any sense to me.
That can actually cause anxiety in the dog because if they feel like they have, because they're always so used to going out and finding something, and then they go out and there's nothing there. I believe, and I've seen this happen actually with nosework dogs, is that nosework dogs, if they encounter that, they've never seen a blank, but they feel anxiety because they feel like they have to find something. You got a false alert. So you're actually risking a false alert when there's no odor if you haven't trained your dog to search for no odor. There's a big piece of that.
I totally, yes. And I think we tend to think about some of this a little bit too regimented. Like, okay, we have to go through the whole progression plan, or people are looking for checklists, right? On how to do this in their training, and introducing blanks can actually come in fairly soon into the whole training atmosphere, because at the point when you're actually thinking about introducing nose time searching is when you should be introducing blanks, because guess what? Blanks are nose time.
Yep.
And
yes, great way to build stamina.
Right. Stamina and attention, and work on that little clock that the dogs have going on. So, I'm at the point with, the girls, I'm not ready to introduce blanks, mainly because they're going through the teenage tyrant stuff. So that was the last episode. So, we're not doing a whole lot of that sort of stuff, but very shortly after they pop out of this, we'll go back to some of the detection dog training, and absolutely they get blanks. And I absolutely reinforce for a good search. It's not that level A reinforcer that we talk about. It's not, oh my gosh, we're going to play a huge game of fetch. You might get some cookies. You might get a good dog. You might get to hold your toy. But I think that that's actually important for managing the anxiety level and letting the dog know, you did what I asked you to do. You cleared an area. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think that's where you and I might differ a little, because I thought it was kind of interesting when you asked me if I started RAD on blanks. And I start them right away. Like you said, as soon as they're in the search phase, but I start them when we go to the field and we play ball. So you fake throw the ball and they take off and they're trying to hunt and they're trying to find the ball and there's no ball there. Well, that's a blank. They think it's productive, but it's not. And so I use that for teaching some of the concepts of the hunt and the search, and that I watch their body language, because like I said, that's when I learn the most about when they're in odor and not. And then sometimes the ball will appear, in this, convenient place that I will put it. But then also I'll reward her just for being out there and searching. But even when we get into more of when we're actually in the search for odor, and she thinks that that's a possibility, and I've given that command where I'm saying find, even then I reward with the fluff ball and the highest reward, because, like you said, I want her to know that she's right, because she went out and worked her tail off. And I feel that the A level is what's important, and that's what's needed. And so I know it's a difference in, managing arousals and expectations. But to me, I'm really thinking about, you taught me about that search, locate, and report. And I try to reward all three with that A level as much as I can to build those things.
Yes.
Which makes a lot of sense. I have to say, I don't usually use the A+ reinforcer for blanks, and I'll tell you why. And I actually usually don't tell my students to, for a couple of reasons. What I do from a reinforcement perspective is I tell people, you can praise the dog in the search, but if you're going to give your dog a cookie, don't do that unless you've left the search area. I can tell from personal experience that if you start to give a dog a cookie in the search area after they do a blank search, what happens is they start to stop that search earlier and earlier because they're looking for the cookie. And I found that if you have a dog that has any kind of a tendency towards handler focus, that actually, especially with a higher reward value, seems to add to that handler focus. And you may get a dog that either searches less thoroughly, or perhaps that dog starts to end that search prematurely. And that's when you risk calling a blank in a competition perspective, where it actually isn't blank. So
I love that so much. I'm so like narrowly focused. That's why I love that you've worked with so many handlers. I've only been working with very independent, gives very little.
Yeah, if you have an independent dog, it's totally different. It's a different situation.
I'm so glad you said that, because I am. I'm from the scope of, I have a very independent dog who is out there doing the thing. And I mean, both of my dogs could be way out in the field for like 20 minutes before I tell them, yes, you've done the thing. And they're just so excited that I've rewarded them for that search. So I'm so glad that you said that, because I'm thinking very narrow in that.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about, somebody who comes with their, I'm not trying to pick on breeds, but they come with their little
off breed for the thing.
Little off breed. I'll just say little fluffy off breed or something.
That's
I don't want to pick on a breed. Right? Like, that's my breed.
That was politically correct.
I don't want that to happen. Exactly. Thank you. So a little off breed dog who may not have the same level of drive, but if you start to give a cookie like in the search area, or you start to bring out, hey, I have a hot dog for you, they're going to come in and they're going, oh, forget the searching thing. I just want the hot dog. And you can misinterpret that in a competitive environment and start to think that the area is blank and the dog really hasn't even searched the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is actually also when I call finish, same deal, right? When I call finish, it's like, I think I found all the hides. I don't give a cookie for the finish call either.
Right.
Because that's praise. Like, hey, you were amazing. Okay, now let's leave the search area. Hey, now let's have our party. You can have a cookie there. But if I start to do that in the search area, it starts to really blur those lines. And I can tell you, speaking from experience, I missed hides in NW3 my first time through when I was doing that with Judd, because I started to rely on, he would stop and he'd look at me and I'm like, hey, he's all done. He's giving me this all finished cue.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. Learn that the hard way. So I tell people, you know what, guys, it's really great to reward that blank area, or it's great to reward that finished cue, but do that outside the search area. Don't do that inside the search area. You are really setting yourself up for some missed hides.
And
such great points.
Bounce off of that. I totally agree. And it's when you're talking about a blank area, this is the thing that I think we should really start reframing how we think about blank areas. Blank areas are an opportunity for us to work on nose time with the dogs. We call when it's finished. The dog doesn't call when it's finished. Right. Now, and then you can actually, yes, like you said, you can force, that'll do. We're done. Here's a cookie. If you watch me with the puppies, that'll do scatter, which means no type A or level A reinforcement is available, but I'll give you some cookies. And even with the labs, that's like at a C level reinforcer at the moment. But then one of the most powerful teaching tools you can have is to actually go from a blind blank that you force the handler to call and immediately pop them into a area, a blind with a hide.
Okay, you got to define blind. That may be something new for some people.
Blind, single blind. So this means that the handler doesn't know where it's at. And I like doing this as facilitated blinds. And what I mean by that is you have someone with you who knows where odor is and actually has watched other dogs work it so that they have a really, really good indication on where odor is presenting. So if needed, you can help guide the person into and out of odor as they need to learn the lesson, mostly that the handler needs to learn, not that the dog needs to learn. So I think that is something that we underestimate the value of blinds and blanks being able to teach handlers to read dog body language. And
You said single blind, but what's double blind?
double blind means that the handler doesn't know where it's at, and the person, anybody walking with the handler, doesn't know where it's at, or the handler is sent out there by themselves to go and then comes back and report. More like in our world, an actual detection deployment. Go forth and search. Come back and tell us if you found anything. And only after you have debriefed will they tell you whether you're right or wrong, which is sort of scary, but
yeah, stressful.
So to build on that, the other thing that you can do, in addition to either going from a blind blank into an area with odor, is if you're working on your own. And I tell people to do this all the time. Although I've also done this in seminars where I have people search an area, right? And then in that same area, then we put odor.
Correct.
So that way because people can, what I find is that when you're in the area and you've searched it, you can kind of orient to that area a little bit. So you can start to see when your dog then goes in there and they start to give you those changes of behavior, you're able to see that dog in that same search area. That becomes crystal clear also. So it's a little bit of a different flavor of the same type of exercise. Fabulous exercise to teach the handler how to read the dog.
Something else I like about that too is I had Yukon who doesn't have a memory, and then I have Radish who does have a memory. And that was fascinating for me that I've now used that technique of having the area that didn't have anything. And then I've put something there. And then I've come back again a month later and put something somewhere else. But of course, the first thing she did was go back to where it was the first time.
Of course.
Darn those labs.
Yeah. I mean, she's got a lab in her. So, so I think that's a great way to also see if you wanted to test your dog's memory, to see if you had this area that had something and then go back to it and kind of do an experiment with your dog and see what kind of memory they have. Like that'd be a cool way of doing it, is using blank areas for that.
Right. And I very easily can tell when you're working with people where you typically put your hides. I was working with some people over the weekend at a military working dog thing. And we were talking about placing hides in the sense of we need to place a hide here because the dogs automatically target known objects, filing cabinets, bookshelves, those sorts of things, right? So we put them in different areas. And so really thinking about using blanks, because you can actually let the dog realize in a blank room that those areas aren't fruitful. And then you put out a nice odoriferous hide in a different room with it in a unique, presentation in the middle of the room under a cart or something, or in the floor in a drain.
Yep. That reminds me of a Yukon story. I was doing live find with him, and we had an area that I didn't have anybody. And he, in the open field, went to every single tree that was just like solo trees and really helped me realize. And then he got so frustrated at one point that he just ran to the closest tree that was just where he was at his frustration point and just stood at the tree and just started barking and then looking at me like, it has to be a tree at this point. I'm frustrated.
And hiding people behind trees a lot.
And it's so funny because
Bravo's dropping the F-bomb.
Well, when I did area search, I don't know why I thought of things so differently, and probably because I just got started, but I didn't do a lot of blank. And so then when I moved into cadaver, I started blank straight away. And maybe it's because he already had the locate and the report part down. And so I was working a lot more on his searching ability and teaching search strategies. And so maybe that's the difference of why I did it so soon. And then he taught me with Radish that I'm starting blanks right away with our ball game, with our hunt games, and indoor, outdoor. Like we do blanks a lot. And I guess I'm curious too, what do you guys think about the frequency of when you do blanks, especially for the different areas, versus bomb stuff versus nose work?
I'll be honest, we as trainers don't train blanks probably as often as we should, because it's not reinforcing for the handler, and think about the you talk about handler bias, unless it's a blind blank and you don't know if anything's there or not because you didn't set it up. You're like, what's the purpose of searching a blank? And even the signals that you can throw off by knowing whether something's there or not is actually really obvious to the dog. I mean, I was talking about doing blanks with Nico one time that I'll put in my earbuds and go out and walk her through the field for 45 minutes. And all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I can't do that because I walk differently when I'm listening to a book on my earbuds versus when I'm searching. And he can tell the difference in how I'm moving and how much I communicate with him and all of those sorts of things. So then it became okay, now we have to go for a 45-minute walk in the woods by myself with the dog. And I have to act like we're actively searching. And so it becomes this whole thing where you're thinking about all of the stuff that you have to do to make it feel like a real blank. That's why I'm a huge proponent of blind blanks, because it really does teach you how to read your dog.
So I do something called a sniff and dismiss. And what that is that I'm asking the dog to check something, right? They're sniffing something, and then they dismiss it. The dog has to know that it's okay to check something and then to leave it, right? Because there's nothing there. I have to see what that dismissal looks like. And we have to, and it's also the way we clear areas. It's the way we clear these larger areas. And it's how I prepare my younger dogs for the upper level. Because we're going to get up to the summit level, right? At some point with all the dogs, and they're going to have to go through large areas where there's absolutely nothing in there. And I have to be confident in moving through those areas rapidly, right? And if I don't teach that sniff and dismiss, if I don't work through those large unproductive areas in some of my regular searches, I'm not going to feel comfortable moving through at the pace that I need to.
I totally agree with that, because that is the definition actually in search and rescue of what we do. We do a lot of sniff and dismiss. And unless you're doing forensics work, and I'm talking not trailing, right? Because that's a whole different little animal of its own, or forensics cadaver. But when we're looking for the large amounts of human odor and scent, we're doing lots of sniff and dismiss of, no, we've cleared this area. And one of the best exercises I can do for handlers in training is they've got a map and we're out doing stuff. And I do this to people in certifications a lot. Mark off on the map what you are going to call clear. And we set out this problem the other day that Crystal was talking about for the cadaver dogs. And it was basically 3/4 of an acre. And I'm out there mentally crossing out what areas are clear in my brain, because when you have really diffuse odor, I use that in order to help narrow down where odor may be, so I don't spend additional time searching unproductive areas, and help my dog learn it. And it helps, I'm more than Uber, so I might as well actually do something.
Which actually gets to the point of having a pattern in your search, right? So I'm kind of thinking about this, which is probably going to be another podcast, I would think, the whole pattern aspect. But I was doing this search, and our last summit was this big outdoor area. We had 17 fire trucks and a big open area in between these two huge lines of fire trucks. So the whole area was in play. It was the entire exterior, and it was all 17 fire trucks. It was unknown number of hides. We had absolutely no idea how many hides were out there. And we were given 7 minutes. So with 7 minutes, it may sound like a lot of time, but it's really not. So what I did was literally, asking her to sniff and dismiss. We went down the entire first line, found 3 hides in series, right? So we found them in order because we were working that area, and she can rapidly give me a sniff and dismiss. went around and found the hide over on the other side. And then we ended up crossing through the middle, and there was a hide like smack dab in the middle under like really, there's just like a couple tiny little rocks there. And that's where the last hide was. Before I went back to just check threshold again. But it's that idea of knowing what you've cleared and what you haven't, and being able to kind of build that sniffing and that dismissal, and allowing your dog to dismiss and move on, building that into how you handle makes things a whole lot easier when you're trying to search something like that, rather than, because I think in nose work, I think we have a tendency sometimes to just kind of blindly follow the dog, and then we have absolutely no idea what we've covered and what we haven't. Right. So sometimes giving the dog the skills to search an area that has no odor and that has no odor allows them to transfer that into thoroughly clearing an area.
And everything you guys are talking about is our part of the team. I think so many times when I talk to people, they just think it's all the dog's job. And we have to be a big part of that. And especially as the nose time extends, I like that. I don't remember who said it, but they were saying that is one of the seminars last summer that the dog starts off and we're almost kind of 30-70, they're out there doing their thing and we're trusting their nose. And then as they start wearing down, they're 60 and 50 and are 50-50 and now they're 40 and we're 60. And so I think that's important for people to also realize is that this is our part of the job.
Yeah.
And I think too, Robin said something earlier. She said that her emotions, and that was a huge thing that I've seen, is that when I don't know where it is, that does add a bit of an edge to me. I'm more hyper aware of everything. And I'm not just focused on reading the dog, but I'm focused on reading the dog and the environment and the location. And I feel like it's kind of like what Holly Bouchard said, where it's your camera focus. And as you start to get a little more advanced, that zoom starts to come out further and further and you see the whole picture. And I think that's what blind searches do for me when it's a blind blank, especially because I do start to feel a pressure of, okay, I think we did that. And now, okay, if I say that that's clear, it's a lot of thinking and emotion that starts to come in. And I do think, our dogs know that. And it's interesting to see how that affects my dog. So I like that you brought that up as well.
And Stacy, you mentioned handling the dog being anxious about not finding anything in the area.
Yes.
What about the handler?
Very much so.
I mean,
very much so.
Yeah. The stress level that you see in handlers, they almost get frantic, especially if it's a blind blank, right? And they're expecting something.
The larger the search area, the harder it is.
Right. The anxiety level goes through the roof because they're pretty sure that they've missed something. And then they end up doing all of this really detailed searching when the dog has already been like, no, dude, sniffed it and dismissed it. But then they end up talking the dog into a trained final response because they don't trust the dog to be able to find odor.
Or frustrate the dog so much that it shuts down.
Correct. They're like, I'm out.
Yeah.
You're going to find that if there's novel odors in the area, that if the dog doesn't have that level of comfort with working blank areas or the handler, that dog will all of a sudden, because there's nothing else to sniff, hey, I might as well sniff this novel odor over here. And then the handler starts to step forward like, hey, do you think that's it? Do you think that's it? And the dog goes, oh, you want me to alert on? Whoa, yeah, this is really interesting. And next thing you know, you call alert. And then go back to that dopamine thing. When we're in a competitive environment, you've got maybe sometimes up to 40 dogs searching that same search area. So now not only is it blank, not only do you have novel odor, now you have a dopamine spot. So now you get other dogs false alerting, right? So if you don't build your dog's ability to be comfortable going, yeah, there's nothing in here. Like, this is kind of dumb. Like, you forgot the odor again, mom, right? If you don't build their comfort in that, you can end up with the false alert, that can happen a lot.
That's exactly how my first false alert happened. And I was so confused. I just could not figure out. I felt like I'd worked so many blank areas and I'd been so thoughtful about so many things and found out that the dog right before mine had that big dopamine dump on a spot behind a little refrigerator in a classroom. And of course, when he went in, it was, blind, so I didn't know. And he goes in and he's searching and he got hung up behind that refrigerator a little bit. But I knew it wasn't the typical, it just wasn't typical, but he was curious. And so it made me curious. And so I did, I took a step over to kind of see, is there something like food or something? And then there was a trash can. And then he said, well, maybe. So that's exactly how that played out.
And you went, really?
Yes, that's exactly how that played out.
Yeah.
And then I looked back and I said, is that correct? They're like, nope.
You're like, no, nothing there.
Like, no, that's what a false alert feels like. This is terrible. And I could replay it, and exactly what you just said is what happened to me. And I was very, very beginning. And exactly what you explained.
And it's even harder if you have a subtle dog. So with nose work, we may have a whole lot of dogs which I think you probably see this in search and rescue too, like a little bit of, like some dogs are just not as emotive. And I found that there is definitely a correlation between subtlety in a dog and the confidence level of the dog. So when you have a dog that is less confident in general, you're going to have a dog that's more subtle. So if you have that, then when you layer on the fact that the handler is so worried, like, oh, my dog's subtle, can I read my dog? And now all of a sudden the dog's sniffing a novel odor. Well, it's like running downhill, right? At that point, it's very easy to call a false alert, because you also find that the handlers will take the dog back to that area over and over and over, right? Now, I have to admit, I do have a subtle dog who is low confidence, a little Y, and I do return to an area that he sniffed and is like kind of interested. However, I do make a point of taking a step back and letting him have the dismissal. That is hugely important, because if you take that low confidence dog who's a little bit subtle, you bring them back 3 times and you step forward, you're going to have a false alert, because you also have in your head, hey, is that odor versus, hey, I think that's novel odor. Just go ahead and check it for me. A little bit of a difference.
And then Robin gave me a little jewel out there in our little 3/4 acre piece. Do you remember what that was, Robin? Do you know what I'm referring to?
No idea.
There was an area that you kept leaning toward. You kept kind of saying, I think it's kind of over here. And I said, what would you have done differently?
Oh, I said I would have swimmed further upstream. Yeah.
So can you kind of explain that? Because it was so good.
Yeah. So this was a blind. Not a blank. So it was a blind. Source is actually still out, but it'd been out for like 4 days. And as Crystal was saying, it was hot, whatever. And the way that odor was moving, I got very, very stuck in the picture in my head as to what would happen if odor had only been out 24 to 48 hours. Instead of possibly being out longer. And we'd had pretty good south winds. And I usually suggest to people, if your dog is giving a lot of nose up, diffuse odor, body behavior, which by the way is another episode. And the thing that I didn't do was I didn't move him continually upstream or into the wind to finish clearing my area. I got stuck.
Yeah.
And stood in one spot too long. And so as soon as I picked up and I pushed him, not like physically pushed him. He's an 85-pound Dutch Shepherd. Not to do much of anything. And so,
true things.
Yes, physically just moved. So he expanded his hunting, and he slowed down enough. So we went from Mach 5 down to like a half a Mach. I don't even know what that is, but
fast to less fast.
Yes, right. Then it was like almost, we had some tire ruts and some other stuff play into it, which was kind of interesting. But at that point, it was like he had no problem sourcing it out and just going ahead and being like, oh, well, yeah, it's right here. Duh. Yeah. And I was just like, well, if I would have done that 3 minutes ago, we would have solved the problem. And so the interesting thing of, push upstream, you can always clear out your area and then come back the other direction. So,
And I know that was a productive area and it's off topic of blank, but it's still the same concept. So you don't know if it's blank or not. And so if you do get hung up in an area, kind of like I got hung up at that little fridge, or other times you've been hung up, just get out of that area, and like you said, a push. So the push for you kind of is I just turn my shoulders, and I do think, I know, Stacy, you were talking about another episode, maybe about how different sports help. It's that agility turn, just the turn of the shoulders was enough that he would come out of the area. And just that little bit of that movement was enough to kind of say, oh, okay, that's really not as productive as I thought it was, which is a blank.
Right. Because agility handling is actually the same as nose work handling or detection handling. It's all the same, right?
Yeah.
But what you're also doing there is you're releasing pressure. So when we're interested in something, we're stepping towards it. We're putting a lot of body pressure on the dog, and that keeps the dog in the spot, right? But if we actually take a step back just a little bit or open up our shoulders just a little bit, we just relieve that pressure. And if you have a pressure sensitive dog, a lot of times they go, oh, thank goodness I can leave. Like there's nothing here, and then they start to move on versus like, okay, I'm going to keep searching this if you really want me here,
That just brought up a really good idea too. Or I don't know, it just popped in my head. I'm really thinking about my next search, how I can use a blank area to work on my handling skills and make that the focus.
Yeah.
So that I can really see if I turn this way or I step this way, how much is my dog responding to my pressure? So that's my next search. Thank you. I know what I'm doing tonight.
It's pretty cool. It's cool stuff, isn't it?
And it's so interesting, the difference between dogs and how they perceive that same movement. I think Rad is even more independent than Yukon is. And so she will really get out there and she doesn't notice me as much. And so I have to be totally turned around and walking the other way before she's like, oh, hey.
Oh, you're here too.
I'm really excited to think about how she perceives my movement. I'm going to make that my priority. So I like that challenge. Thank you.
And blanks are really good for teaching the handler how they can push and pull their dog, because you don't really have to worry about the dog running into odor and having a brain of its own at that point. And you can use them to be like, okay, this is what it looks like when my dog works through this specific type of an area with this terrain or these features with no odor present. So that the next time you do that, when you're on a deployment or you're out on a search, and your dog moves through the area with that type of confidence and speed, you've seen it before.
Yeah.
At least we hope the area is blank. That's always the problem with search and rescue.
I had a student. She submitted the video. It was really interesting. The dog is actually very green, but I asked them to do a blank, right? Because we do blanks pretty early, and this is my foundations class. And she went to, I think it was like a Tractor Supply or something. And she purposely, she was going to video her dog, and she's doing this blank search. The dog gets an odor. Somebody had left a hide. So she accidentally, it was an accidental blind.
Right.
Wait, where was this?
So I don't know. I don't even know where she lives. Right.
So like in a store?
Yeah, in a store. Somebody left it in. And she's like, whoa. She's like, well, I saw him get an odor, so I just wanted to see what happened. And he sourced it. So it was actually really interesting. She's like, well, it was supposed to be a blank search.
I say that, but I was at Home Depot and my guy found it was a big gauze that had blood on it that was back by the saw, and it was in a trash can. And didn't even.
Maybe that's because it was by the saw.
Well, maybe that's what that is funny. I said that. No, but it was just where the trash can was, I think. But
it was by all the murder weapons. That's where we found all the blood. I don't know what happened.
But I felt so bad that I was telling him, no, let's go, because I knew it wasn't there, and he was, yes, it is. And what a jerk. So then when I actually went and looked in the trash can, I'm like, oh, you were right. There is a bloody gauze in there.
Sorry, buddy.
Oh, you're such a good boy. Here's your fur ball.
With nose work, we tell people to be extraordinarily careful about leaving hides and everything. When you're talking like kind of bodily fluids, that gets a little, you just never know. I mean, it could be legitimately like somebody cut themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally forgot about that until you said that. I'm like, oh,
that's really funny. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm like, oh, you did an accidental blind. Like, okay. It's just, her dog did a beautiful job. I mean, it was really nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
And as a great blind for her. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wow. Bonus.
Yeah. I guess that qualifies as a double blind, I guess.
But good on her for, recognizing that her dog was an odor, and she was way better than me. Ugh.
well, she recognized it, and kind of like bonus, it was on, the camera was set up in the right spot.
Yeah. Oh,
But,
yeah.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
So you said that you introduced them pretty early with your class. When do you introduce them, or exactly how do you introduce them?
So basically, if the dog understands unequivocally when they get set up on the start line that they're going to search, right? That there's no question, right? You just set them on the start line, and regardless of where they are, they're going to search. If they can do that, and they're kind of fluent at just, I'm using that word a little loosely, they're proficient. I'll use the word proficient. They're proficient at sourcing hides. At that point, I'll start to incorporate a blank search here or there. And I did that exercise where I just said, and this is in the homework, I said, I want you to pick a room or whatever, and I want you to search, preferably off leash, observe the dog, and see what kind of behaviors the dog gives you, because, people kind of think like, oh, it's the absence of the change in behavior. Like, no, there's a ton of behavior that the dog's going to give you when there's nothing there. And then I want you to put a hide there, and then I want you to search it. So you kind of see a little bit of the difference. But because there's a huge amount of, I tell people, I said, learning how to search in the absence of odor is actually more important than learning how to search around odor.
Yes.
It's way important to know, what does your dog look like in no odor than what do they look like when they're in odor.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's boring. So one of the things I've actually started looking at is, and thinking about, why do people train the way they do, and why do people, how do we get wrapped up in this whole thing, right? And my answer has been a lot of times come back to, it's not reinforcing for the trainer. It's not reinforcing for the handler, so they don't do it. And blanks can actually expose a lot of holes in your training, which doesn't make us feel very good. Because, watching our dogs find stuff and use their nose, whether, and then for me, I've really learned to love that train final response part, probably a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But watching the dog do that whole chain is like, so we're like, oh, look at our pretty unicorn pony who can do that.
Well, and it's also the interaction with the dog, right? I mean, when you're rewarding the dog after they find the hide, that's fun for us too.
Yes.
Especially if we're playing with the dog and the dog lights up. Well, we love this dog, right? This is a dog that we care deeply about, and they're so proud of themselves. They found the hide. So for us, that feels really good.
Correct.
So it's highly reinforcing for the handler to find a hide. And hey, in competition, we get a yes, right?
Right. Which is like a click for the human.
Exactly. It's like, we get the yeses, we get the points, right? We actually get points for our yeses.
And then you get even delayed reinforcement, because then you get ribbons, which rocks.
Yeah. Well, that and a lot of the levels, we have no idea if we're successful until the end of the day.
Right.
We just know we didn't have a false alert.
Right. The humans get delayed reinforcement. So, but that's probably, one of the things that I think about as we're talking through, the use of blanks is, blanks are one of those things that maybe not reinforcing for the handlers. Buried odor is also difficult. Not only it's difficult to set up, it's all of these bajillions of things. And so really start thinking about what you find reinforcing as a trainer or handler to set up, because I bet that's where your dogs rock. I know it is for me. I really like cars. My dogs are pretty good at cars because they're easy to set up and they're easy to take down. And, you can run them and just be done. It's like, boom, boom, boom. Okay. Phew, training done for today. So blanks are one of those things that I can just feel, oh my God, I'm going to go run a blank. And I can feel this whole internal teenage eye roll happening in my head. Blanks?
Yeah.
We really have to do blanks?
Robin, you crack me up so much because I feel like just like I'm all ate up about obedience and and like that's the most fun. And I really love blanks. I'm so weird, I guess. I didn't realize it. But I see so many teachable opportunities. And then also, I think I was talking to you guys earlier about this, that if I'm on my way home from work and I don't have time to go put odor out in a field, I'm excited to go do a blank because I'm thinking, okay, I've got a great chance to get a lot of nose time. And, I try to think of, like today, listening to Stacy and going, okay, I'm really going to make sure this time I'm going to pay attention to my movement and how it affects my dog. And like what you said, Robin, earlier about, I'm going to look at that terrain and how it affects my dog. I see so many possibilities with it. And I don't know, I just love blank areas.
I love your attitude.
I love watching them search.
Agreed.
And like Quinn, he gets the helicopter tail, that propeller that goes. And I think, what it probably is? I am so enamored by just watching dogs, watching them work, watching them think. And then, I just love it.
so here's the thing. I think we need to, I think we need to state this, I think we really need to state this. Your dog doesn't need to end a session with a hide or a search with a hide
or a win because, here's the thing. I think people get so wrapped up with like, well, I did a blank. Now I got to go do something with odor. I'm like, oh, no, really, you don't. Your dog really enjoyed searching, right? Searching is reinforcing for the dog. I know I'm going to tell a little story if that's okay.
Oh yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I started NW3, this is back before Elite was even born. So this is before Elite wasn't born yet. Summit wasn't even a twinkle in the eye. And we're doing NW3. And I have to tell you, I went into NW3 initially with Judd. I hadn't trained blanks because my initial feeling on blank areas was that it was a setup. I'm like, I'm setting my dog up. I'm like, I'm asking them to search. They're not going to find anything. I'm like, haha, joke's on you. Right. And that was kind of my feeling about blank areas at the time. And, I just remember a couple of the certifying officials or the judges or whatever, because they would do like a whole debrief that we don't get the full debrief anymore at the end of the day, but they would do this and they were like, guys, you need to work on blank areas because they're like, searching is reinforcing for the dog. Hides, this is searching. This is called searching. It's not called finding. Right. And that the hides are reinforcing to the handlers. And I was sitting there, I'm like, you don't know. No, the hides are reinforcing to I'm, going through, I'm like, kind of the naysayer sitting in the back of my head. Right. And I have to tell you, like, I remember one of the first blank areas that I did with Judd. I was in a competition and I got a comment on my score sheet that was back in, 2014. And I still remember the comment on that score sheet. And I did this blank area and we were in there for forever. And because Judd hadn't done very many of them, he actually worked harder because he was like, there's got to be odor in here somewhere. So he's working, right? And I finally called finish before we ran out of time. And on my score sheet, the judge wrote, handler needs to write finish on her hand. And oh my gosh, that gutted me because I'm like, whoa. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? She was right. She's really right because I really need to trust that there's no odor in here. Then I found that as I started to do blank areas more frequently, Judd didn't work quite so hard and he started to go in there and he kind of, move around. I'm like, yeah, okay. You're giving me blank area behavior. And then later on, Elite was born and I started to do these bigger areas because we didn't have those big, huge areas in NW3 yet. So we got into Elite and I'm like, whoa, that's a bigger area. Right. And then it got worse, got into Summit. And I started to realize, I'm like, hey, we need to do this blank stuff. And I started to realize you still enjoy it regardless of if you find a hide. And all those pieces kind of came together. And I started to realize I'm like, oh my gosh, they were right back when they were telling me, hey, this is reinforcing for the dog. So So I have done a complete 180 in my thought process from when I started searching with nose work and now. And I have to tell you, my dogs are exposed to blank areas early and they are way better for it. And I expose my students to it. They expose their dogs to them early also. And it is totally okay to do. And let me tell you, it is searching. It is not finding.
Well, and
that's my story.
Right. I want to bounce off of something Crystal said earlier that I think is an underutilized tool for training, because people are, oh my gosh, train and hunt drive, hunt drive, all of this other prey drive stuff. Okay. Let's talk about what the dog finds motivating, because that's actually what we're working in is motivators. And so how do you build a dog to enjoy hunting? Because that is basically what a blank area is nothing but hunting. And so Crystal was talking about the toy game, and this is absolutely something that I do, especially in the winter when it's cold and my dogs are like, we're going crazy. The whole mock throw a ball thing, and it's fabulous when, I live in Iowa, so we have snow, and you throw a toy out into snow and it disappears.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's so hard.
And there's no footprints.
And there's no footprints. Right?
Let's
talk. Make sure you take 2 toys when you do this.
Otherwise, in the spring, you'll find it.
Well, and this is the benefit of having big flat fields, because I had to do this spring. I lost a toy out in the middle of a snowbank somewhere, and I had to wait for everything to melt, and then I went out and retrieved my toy. But the ability to understand that, you can throw a toy out there and you can progressively build your dog up to the point where you're out there standing and they're hunting actively for a toy for 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like through magic, when they're turned the other direction, the toy appears about 10 feet in front of you, or, in a totally different location that you can lob it at and they can't see it.
Right.
And they run into it. It's like, you're a magician. And, but what you've actually done is successfully reinforced a whole time period of hunting. Yeah. Which translates over into everything else that you're doing in your detection work.
Well, it's kind of like if you only do easy hides and the dog really doesn't have to hunt for it, you're not creating value for the hunt.
Right. And so,
So you're talking about really creating that value for that hunt.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that us thinking about blank hides or blank areas as really what we're doing is we're working on our hunting.
Yeah.
And team hunting. Not just the dog hunting, team hunting.
Yep.
Maybe we should reframe blanks into being, these are hunt problems.
Yeah. Hunt setups.
How and working on the sniff and dismiss and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Kind of like search setup. It's got the SS, just because just the whole search locate report thing. It's just it's a search game.
It's a search game.
It's just some alliteration.
Yeah, I can't help myself.
Yeah, just like some alliteration there. So it's yes, but like I said, it's searching. It's not finding. I mean, sometimes it's finding, but sometimes it's just searching. And the dog enjoys both.
If you have appropriately built it, because I think you can very easily push your dog over the deep end of.
Absolutely.
And that was one of those things that, we were working the problem yesterday, and Chris, because it was hot and we had minimal water, and Nico went from Mach 10. You notice he keeps going faster every time we start. Then we went from Mach 10 to now I'm watching him run around like at the pace of a normal dog. And I looked at her and said, I have got about 2 minutes for us to figure out this particular problem before I am going to push him to the point where he's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I never want to push my dog to the point where they say, I'm out on the hunting phase.
So I think that's a huge, huge important piece of it. And then when you're in those blanks, make sure you're not just, you shouldn't be taking a brand new green dog and doing a big, huge blank area. You've got to be, it's got to be commensurate, right? It has to be commensurate with their experience and with their desire and with their, yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you said, Stacy, where you said that you put large unproductive areas to teach the blind within your search. What a great way to introduce that blindness, that you can build that trust that you're going to be successful. Keep going, buddy. You're going to get there. I love that trust piece. And I found, I remember taking a blank webinar from you, and I just looked it up, and it was June 18th of 2020, Reading Your Dog series, Blank Areas. Because it was such an important webinar that I watched. It really, it sparked so many ideas, and before you're even friends.
Crazy. That's
but
crazy.
Something in there that you really stated that stayed with me was the idea that you're teaching stamina, communication, and trust. And I think that's something that we've talked a lot about this last hour. Is that's what you're building, and you're building an awareness, and it really is all about reading your dog, but also reading ourselves.
So I just did a webinar last night on blank areas. That recording is available, by the way, if anybody is interested. So that's on my video on demand webinar site, which is movies.sensibilitiesnw.com. And
we'll
you can
put a link in.
In the show notes. It's happening.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a recorded webinar. So it's about 2 hours long. Actually, not quite 2 hours, but just under 2 hours on blank areas. So that includes Q&A.
Fantastic.
Your information is just so impressive. I love the way you think through and you present. There was a graphic that you had in that one, and it just really, it helped me understand things so much better. And you had so many videos, and it just, and you know what it was? How did you say it? It was something about, it's not an absence. How did you say it?
It's not an absence of change in behavior, right? There's definitely, it has its own behaviors.
Yes. And that is what blew my mind. And I think that's honestly what got me so excited about blank areas. You know what? That is what did it. Because it was the moment of that recognition that the dog does something different in a blank area, and it's not just an absence of odor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an absence. That's good.
It's a big leap when a lot of people, when people start to make that.
It was huge for me.
It's huge.
It was huge for me because it wasn't just an absence of what was supposed to be happening, but it was whole new behaviors that I started witnessing. And, since I'm such a geek about watching the dog, that was what I got so excited. And I'm like, you can do
love
that in a
I'm
blank?
like, the dog's going up.
Yes.
The dog's going up. I'm like, okay, it's probably blank. There's probably nothing here.
Right.
Yeah. And then when showing the disinterest and the wanting to leave, and it was so good. I'm like, yay, look, there's all these new things I can look for that really tells me that this area is not productive.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you get the sniff and then they kind of gaze off into they're sniffing novel odor, and then they kind of look a little confused and they kind of gaze off into the environment, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that is just this was really interesting odor, but there's nothing out here.
Yeah, the sniffing frequency, all that stuff. Oh my gosh. So now I have to go watch your webinar from last night, and I'm really sad that I missed it.
I'll get you the link.
Yay.
Ladies, this was a fantastic discussion on why we should incorporate blanks into our training more often.
I think we covered the who, what, when, where, why, and how of it, in fact.
I think we did. Now,
I think so.
We'll be even covering blanks in Distraction Camp, which is at the beginning of August here at Canine Census, because blanks are a really important way for you to incorporate distractions or diversions into your
even
training.
Said the word diversion today.
I know, and I didn't groan.
I'm sitting there going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We just have to add a little bit,
Pretty much anybody that listens to us is going to have to just listen to that D's episode to even understand any of our stupid jokes. We think we're way funnier than we are, I think.
Yeah. So, okay, register for Distraction Camp. We're going to put links to Stacy's webinar in the show notes because she's got some awesome stuff about blanks.
2 hours worth, dude.
I know, right?
And do you have videos too?
With videos.
Yeah, because
With
your videos are
amazing. Right. And then make sure to sign up for the freebie and everything on the website. So thank you for joining us.
Canine Detection Collaborative.
We appreciate the time you spend with us. If you liked this episode, not only should you follow us so you don't miss the next one, but please also rate and review us in your favorite podcast app. For info on collaborating with us, go to k9detectioncollaborative.com. That's K9detectioncollaborative.com, where you can find our socials and pick up our latest monthly freebie. Join us again to talk training in the next episode.